Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. We are here for the first time in 2025, probably not the last time in 2025, so we've got that to look forward to. And I have with us the once and future Mala. How you doing, Mala?
Good evening, everyone. I'm doing well, thank you.
It's good to have you back. It's good to
Same here.
back
Same
from your Aaron Rodgers themed vacation of self-discovery and mushrooms in caves in Arizona, I believe it is. The Darkness Retreat, I believe, is what the kids are calling it these days. And speaking of Darkness Retreats, we have Mike Christensen. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, doing well, thanks. I just got out of my cave, and I'm doing great. And
you look like you're still in your cave, actually.
Yeah, that's true. Mala, you moved your setup. Did you change your home situation?
No, I just rearranged the room a little bit. That's all right.
Nice.
New year, new arrangement.
The lighting is still not good enough, but that I will have to work on.
Yeah, it's okay.
But nothing else other than just moving stuff around.
That's fair. That's fair. And also, close Shop Talk watchers may notice that the wrinkles on my green screen have changed slightly. So,
man, you have to be really good at
that. Welcome in, Anders. Good.
Hi, Anders.
All right. So, if this is your first time here, welcome to Shop Talk. The idea is that we're sometimes a little bit irreverent, sometimes a bit irrelevant as well. So, not always hitting the high notes in terms of multisyllabic adjectives, but this is a chance for us to get together. It's Monday. Work is probably over, unless you're on the West Coast, in which case work was probably over 2 hours ago. Let's just be honest. Once it's lunch, it's all downhill from there. So we're here. There's a little bit of technical Q&A. If you have questions in chat, this is your opportunity. Talk to us. We may or may not have answers, but we probably will give you answers, even if we don't have them. Or you're me and running until 7 to 8 is the normal schedule. Yeah, but Marshall, you don't show up to work until 10, 11 o'clock. So it balances out. The universe balances in that regard.
I have a quick question. What SQL Saturday shirt is that? So it says.
Oh, this one was Baton Rouge.
I can't see the year.
2019.
One of them have half a dozen SQL Saturdays that are still around, which aren't in that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of SQL Saturdays, we don't have our SQL Saturday yet. We might have one this year. We'll find out. It's kind of getting crunch time, admittedly, but we'll see. We'll see what we can pull off. Things are kind of busy at command headquarters.
People asked at the summit about
what's that, Mala?
People were interested.
Yeah. I mean, it's a happening event. There are dozens of us here. All right. So, with that stated, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe next episode of Shop Talk we might have some progress on a SQL Saturday. I don't want to make any promises yet.
So you have some leads. Okay, we need to talk about that. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, we'll talk.
What do you do?
Yeah, we can talk after the show ends, Mala.
Okay. That's good to hear. Yeah.
Involve me because I
have something for you too in that regard about the people who said they were interested in such.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk afterwards. So sorry, chat. That's a private conversation. It's a board conversation. Until we tell you in 2 weeks.
We don't want to raise any excitement unless things really work out. That's the reason.
I mean, that's the honest reason. Yeah.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. I don't want to say, yeah, we're going to have one. And then 2 months later, hey, what happened to that event you were going to have? About that. So all that said, stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have something. Speaking of something, we did have tri-pass elections that happened over the course of the last month. There was a 6-week stretch, late November into December. And the good news is that all of the board members survived another round of Survivor. This is the worst game of Survivor ever. We've never kicked anybody off of the island. So I guess it's more like Gilligan's Island than Survivor.
Yeah.
But it turns out that we all had a resounding 125% of the vote, which is up from 105%, which is what I told Mike just before we went live. So our vote counters are doing an amazing job, and I will continue paying them. All right. So we have a few topics. Thought it would just be a 3-hour tour. I thought I'd be done by now. Vote early, vote often. That is my philosophy, Anders. Or alternatively, don't vote. You'll just encourage them. Depends on my mood that day. So we have, because Mala is here, and we haven't had Mala here for a little while, and because, well, frankly, we didn't have Shop Talk here for a little while because we had to cancel the one Shop Talk at the end of the year, and we weren't going to do one on New Year's Eve. I don't think I might not have shown up for that one. But nonetheless, we do have Mala here, and Mala was at Past Summit. Mala has thoughts from Past Summit, so let's get Mala's reflections on Past Summit. I don't have any reflection opening music, though.
So this is my first summit after 2020. That's after Redgate took over running the summit. And this was there. So he knows what went on. And it was a really good conference, very professionally organized. The new convention center at Seattle is awesome. It's a great location. Glass panes all around, letting a lot of light in. Really nice classrooms. Everything about it was really, really nice. The building was at least 50% of the reason why people loved coming in every day was that building, because it was so bright and so nice. But the conference was extremely well organized. I had a good time. I didn't sit in a lot of classes because I haven't seen people in a very long time, and I just didn't have enough time catching up with people. That took most of my time. I didn't sit in too many classes, and they were live streaming most of the sessions I wanted to see anyway. So it didn't make sense for me to go and sit inside a cramped classroom for that. Microsoft's presence was very minimal. That was the one thing that stood out more than anything else. And first summit where the new version of SQL Server was not announced at Past Summit. I don't know, many people noticed it. I don't know if many people even cared. But as someone who has been to a lot of summits, some of us who are like that, like me, there are a handful of us like me there still. We noticed it. We saw it. It was so obvious. So something has gone sour in that relationship. And if that relationship is not healed, from next year, the summit is not going to be the same as what it was. Some of them came there on their own personal time, and I really appreciate that. All the people I met were mostly there in the evenings after work. They took time on their own to show up and just hang out with community and talk with us and such, which was really nice of them to do. Then nothing to do with Ignite, Anders. I can't say more than that. I'm sorry. Then what else was I thinking? A lot of concerns people had, generally concerns that everybody seems to have these days about the state of the job market, lower salaries, and nobody's sure what skill set is expected in any job. It seems to be spread a little all over the place. So that was the story I heard from a lot of people. A lot of people are in jobs that are paying extremely well because you can't get compatible salaries anywhere else. The market is not doing great in that regard. SQL Server not getting much love from Microsoft was also loud and clear. The focus is overwhelmingly on AI and Fabric, and SQL Server is not getting the love it needs. And that was a little worrying to a lot of people who heard about that. What else? It was mostly it. Twitter not being the one platform where people used to hang out made a big difference, because you didn't know what was going on after the conference, mostly. Unless you heard it via somebody. There was nowhere you could go to see if there was a gathering somewhere, or there was a party somebody was organizing that you were allowed to go to, or any such thing. That networking thing was missing in a big way, and that is probably gone for good. With so many people leaving X and Twitter, I'm gone from there myself. Don't care for it anymore. but that made a big difference. And I knew enough people to hang with. I wasn't bored or anything, but I could see a lot of the younger folks. They just didn't know what to do after the conference. Most of them just went back to their rooms. Some people I found, we hung out together and I introduced them to others, and that happened. But there was no platform for that kind of networking that used to happen before. That was a big difference. That made a big difference.
Cool.
I don't think that's going to come back anytime in the future. There's LinkedIn, there's a few Blue Sky, and a few other things are around, but that level of networking is not going to come back. So that's where we are. They had a Postgres conference at the second floor. That was a good marketing move. Although the folks who attended that Postgres conference, including Adam Mechanic and some people we know, they didn't think highly of it. They thought it was not on the level with the other open source conferences that happen for Postgres and such. But it's their first attempt. That brought in a number of people because that was priced at half of what the summit cost. So some people came in for that. And the vendor area was the same for both conferences. Good way to do it. So that was interesting. And with Microsoft pulling out of the scene, who knows, it might be totally a Postgres conference in the years to come. That's very possible. But that's how it was. It was interesting for me, very different from anything I've attended in the past. Redgate treated me extremely well. I'm grateful for that. Even though I never submitted to speak because I didn't know I was going until the fall. They gave me a chance to sit through more than one session. One was an impromptu session on mentoring, which Chris Yates and I did together. Then a couple of closed-door discussions, one on moves to the cloud and the other on where the market is heading career-wise, and an interview with Louis Davidson, which Kevin, you did that too. That also happened at the summit for me. So I had a wonderful time. I had a blast.
Good. And I think I do agree. There are a fair number of people in the community here who are kind of in that golden handcuff phase where I'm making enough money that I'm going to take a pay cut if I go anywhere else. But if I'd like to go somewhere else, I'm not necessarily liking this job a lot. Just this is the job I have to be in. I should note, I like my job. I'm very happy with my job. So if my employers who know who they are listening, I'm good with that. Please don't fire me. I'm kind of in the middle of trying to get a house, so I kind of need a job. So
my boss is listening, and my boss knows he's the best boss there is. So I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving for as long as he's going to be around.
Although
I got boss vibes.
I think Marshall's best boss status went down a little bit with that awful fabric pun there. So a lot of the elder statesmen and women are either gone or leaving. Yeah, there is a generation change, and
yes,
I would say
that's also true. Yes.
Yeah, I think COVID accelerated that considerably, and also introduced a problem of trying to figure out how to bridge that gap of new people in the community, bringing them into a community, understanding first that there is a community, and how to show them, hey, there's all this, all these resources, all this free training, and not even just free training, just people who are in similar situations to you and have an idea of what you're going through. Because if you're the only DBA at a company full of developers, they're not necessarily going to understand what that life is like. Or you may not necessarily understand the best way to work with them or how to get things done appropriately. And it's good opportunities to meet people and talk about things and find similarities. Another problem seems to be the perspective of a full stack can do everything, and these people haven't yet learned that the lack of specialization is really going to hurt them in the near future. Yeah, some of that is let's run really lean, and the startup mentality of everybody needs to be able to do everything at the company. And then you realize that specialization and division of labor form the extent of the market, and that we've known this for, let's see, almost 350 years at this point. It's been almost 350 years since The Wealth of Nations came out. So we got that going for us. That'll be 2026. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations.
Oh, right.
Very famous line from it is that specialization and the division of labor form the extent of the market. So I love full stacks. Going to provide me a lot of consulting opportunities down the road. I mean, you're not wrong, Anders. You are not wrong. And I think that's also going to be kind of interesting that there are a lot of people who are like full stack and stuck with it, almost is the way that I might phrase it. And then some of these people will eventually need to specialize simply because the job has grown, and you can't necessarily be full stack person as the company gets bigger and bigger and has stronger requirements for visualization, for back-end data processing, for data science, for database administration, for data engineering, for throw out whatever term you'd like, whatever job role that you'd like. At some point, there's a reason that as you get bigger in companies, the teams get more specialized. And that reason is, well, you can't really be an expert on everything, and you can't get pulled in every direction and expect to give 100% everywhere.
Yes.
Full stack devs is why suddenly in 4 months I have 3 extra database engines I'm responsible for. I mean, there's also that. Oh, look, Shiny uses MySQL. Oof. Go ahead, Mike.
Did you say that? Is that Anders saying that?
That is Anders saying that.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't have my
You should, Anders. You should just have all of your developers switch to DuckDB. Then you don't have to manage anything.
Jeez.
So I did actually submit. I submitted a DuckDB session to a couple of SQL Saturdays, I think. I'm interested to see if one of them picks it up because I kind of like the idea. Obviously, DuckDB. Okay, so people who are not familiar with DuckDB,
no,
SQLite for analytics. And if you're not familiar with SQLite, in-process database.
You're not familiar with SQLite, you're on the wrong channel.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Mike. But
sorry, I'm trying to be me.
I mean, you did well. You did well. You're learning.
I'm not as diplomatic as you and Mom. Sorry.
So
DuckDB.
Yeah, SQLite in-process database runs. What I mean by in-process is you're not going to stand up a SQLite server and connect to it remotely. It runs as a process on your machine. You can interact with it. You can write SQL queries, insert data, delete data, update data, whatever. Don't have to worry so much about security until you realize that your data is accessible if somebody accesses your machine. But let's avoid that a little bit for now. DuckDB is a very similar product, except that it is columnar storage of data, so it is intended for analytical purposes. And that sounds weird in the world where for a decade we've been telling people we're having more and more and more data, and our analytics systems have to get bigger and bigger, and we need whole dedicated cloud platforms. I mean, Anders mentioned Snowflake. You could throw out Fabric, Databricks. You could pick whatever gigantic data platform that you absolutely need for analytics, doing any kind of analytics at all.
Spark.
And then you find out, I read somewhere, I don't know how accurate this is, but the large majority of analytics queries access less than 100 megabytes of data.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's interesting, Kevin.
So, if you think about that, okay, DuckDB, which is just running, think of it as like almost running Parquet files locally. Well, most machines are going to be able to handle that pretty easily. So it's an interesting mix-up of analytics, except that your laptop with 32 gigs of RAM or 64 gigs of RAM is suddenly powerful enough to process a lot that we couldn't do a while ago, and it probably has more RAM than some of your SQL Server instances because employers are monsters. Okay, free tip for everybody, except most of the people in the audience already know this. The easiest, cheapest way to make your SQL servers faster is just throw more RAM into it. Assuming if you are on standard edition and you do not have 128 gigs of RAM, make it 128 gigs of RAM. Suddenly you'll find out, unless your databases are they add up to 2 gigs in size or something weird like that, just throw as much RAM as you can at the problem, and suddenly a lot of problems go away. Yeah, obviously this this is not a perfect answer.
Standard edition is bad enough and less than 128 gig of RAM. The standard edition. I think I've been spoiled for some time. I've forgotten those words exist.
Marshall asks, "What is this standard edition?" It's the poverty edition. It's the edition that people go to when they can't afford real edition. The sad part is that in my consulting work, I'm dealing more and more with standard edition. I had one of my customers downgrade from enterprise to standard, and it hurt me. It hurt me to do it. I understood why. They weren't using.
Oh, we have it. The company that acquired has. Marshall's not familiar with it. That's all. We have.
Yeah. It's. Look, there's a good reason to go with enterprise edition. I understand it's more expensive. I understand it got a lot more expensive in 2012. I also understand it's been that way for 12 years. I think just realize that if you're running a company where you expect things to work consistently and at a high scale, that you're just going to have to put the money into investing in your assets to make sure that you're getting the most out of them. And you know what? If you're using standard edition for smaller databases, for smaller systems.
Postgres is the new standard edition. I like that.
That's also not incredibly wrong. When you look at licensing and pricing, there are a fair number of companies that have said, well, we'll just go to Postgres instead of paying for SQL Server or Oracle or whatever. And then they find out Postgres is different between multi-version concurrency control, the way it does indexing, the way it does table layouts, maintenance activities, security activities. It has a veneer of being the same as these other platforms, but it is not the same. None of these are exactly the same product. This is why you can't just take Oracle developer, throw that person at a SQL Server and expect that, hey, this person's going to get it in a day.
No.
Or vice versa. It's not a knock on any particular data platform user. It's that these platforms they all are SQL. They all have some version of ANSI SQL, some percentage of the total space of how nomenclature is, but implementations are very different, not only in terms of syntax, but also in terms of how things operate, how you administer, how you query tune, how you ensure that performance is acceptable. And it's for specific cases. Okay, so let me check chat here.
Can I interrupt you while you're checking
Do
chat?
so.
So I have on my list is, and I think my role is kind of like perpetual new person, but I have SQL Server on my home computer, which is a pretty powerful PC with 128 gigabytes of RAM. And I think it was either you, Mala, or maybe Anders was saying SQL Server uses every RAM that you give it. So I'm working on my browser tasks, and I'm like, okay, I have a super beefy PC, right? It uses absolutely every inch of my 128 gigabytes of RAM, right? That's my my baby, it's just like you guys, all of you have said, I was like, oh my God, my machine is stuck because I'm running this huge query on this, the Stack Overflow database that I have saved on my hard drive. And I'm like, oh my God, SQL Server is going to eat it up.
So Mike, have you set the max server memory on that machine?
Oh, I would love to.
Okay, let me show you right now. We're gonna do something for Mike. Let's see.
Wait, do I have to pay you because you're a very highly paid consultant? You and Moa.
Yeah. So I'll take the check later.
I have 97 cents in my pocket.
All right. So Management Studio, probably the easiest way to do it. check out, right click, go to properties.
Okay.
Oh, I just noticed that wasn't showing. Let me stop
What are you
screen
trying to
share.
demo, Kevin?
Well, I'm demoing setting max memory. So actually
Oh,
I
that long number, and that how do you get rid of the long nasty number? Okay.
yep, there we go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well, what happens if you don't get rid of it? Yeah.
Well, what happens is what Mike ran into, where SQL Server takes up all 128 gigs of your available
Uh-huh.
RAM.
It'll take
Uh-huh.
anything you can get. It'll take anything you can get.
Okay, so on this desktop, I have 96 gigs of RAM because Mike shamed me. I had 64 gigs, and then Mike was like, "Wow, you only have 64? What a peasant!"
I apologize. I did because I
No,
was
it was
cracking
okay. I actually needed to switch RAM to something my motherboard supported to make life easier for me. So I went to 96. I'm still not as RAM endowed as Mike, but
well, it's
not
DDR4, so it's
this is
cool.
this is DDR5, so I've got that going for me at least.
DDR5 is
Which means that my startup time is measured in hours. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so you've right-clicked, you've gone to properties, and on here, you go to memory, and you see maximum server memory in megabytes. By default, this is 2 terabytes. Now, even Mike does not have 2 terabytes of RAM on his desktop yet.
not even me.
Now, but you can easily change this. I've got it set to roughly 24 gigs, roughly. And you can make that whatever number you want. You could make it, Anders, I saw mentioned 4 megabytes. I don't recommend 4 megabytes. That's
What is
not
it?
great.
Andrew,
How did he get it to run on 4 megabytes?
It
4
probably
megabytes?
didn't. And Anders
Anders
also
is like-
mentions SP
he's trying
configure.
to jab us.
So I'm gonna script this out so that we can show what Anders meant by using SP configure and learning to love it, because he's absolutely right. SP configure, max server memory in megabytes, and then you set the number of megabytes, and you can reconfigure with override. And at that point, SQL Server is going to accept. It's going to take up approximately that much in terms of buffer pool at its max. So the idea is that it will start off at whatever small number, but then as you start querying tables, as you start reading pages into memory, it's going to say, "Oh, I've got roughly 28 gigs to deal with here, so I'll just keep loading more pages in. No problem, no problem. I'm not going to cycle this stuff out because I am SQL Server. I am the most important thing on your machine. There's nothing more important than me." And you know what? It's right. It's right. There is nothing more important on your machine. Unless you're playing American Truck Simulator, in which case, they're like equal in terms of priority. I still have never played that game, but on your own PC, set the service to manual startup. So I don't do that. I do delayed startup, but I do it automatic because I use this so often. So considering the number of videos that I do, I probably would screw myself over if I set it to manual startup. I would keep forgetting that I need to start the thing up. But I think that's a fair point, that the service doesn't necessarily need to automatically start if you're just messing around on your desktop.
Right.
Okay. Going
Okay,
back.
I get what you mean. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. That's very smart, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let me stop sharing. I will stop that.
That's
Let me
really
quickly
smart.
check chat. As I'm working on annual reviews, I'm kind of far behind in chat. As I'm working on annual reviews, Marshall says, I'm making the point that the specialization is far, far more valuable than the misguided perspective of full stack knows everything. Godspeed to you, Marshall. I could make horrible cracks, and considering that the company isn't even named what it was when I worked there, I'm really inclined to make those cracks, but you get it. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Snowflake for OLTP, Anders says, fired consultants over that one. Frankly, you should fire them and then rehire them just so you can fire them again. That is the third dumbest idea I've heard in a good week and a half.
So not to interrupt, but Snowflake is something that has been implemented at one of my colleagues' workplaces, and it's doing pretty well. I think I think the downside that I've heard is that like if you need to change to a table or a view or whatever, you got to put in a ticket.
Mm. Yeah, it's
Like you can't do it. You got to like go. You got to go to the company and be like, oh, I need a new view. I need a new table. Oh, we need a ticket.
yeah.
But
Snowflake
it
is
performs well.
sure. Snowflake performs really well for OLAP, for analytical processing. It's a data warehousing technology. Um, my problem with Snowflake really is when the bill is due, because they do a lot of stuff behind the scenes to make queries fast. They do a lot of stuff behind the scenes to make it a pretty nice experience for your analytical developers, but all that stuff that they do comes at a big price.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clueless people say they think they always need more data and that the answer to all their questions is more data, rather than figuring out how intelligently to ask their questions. There's a point to that. I think you can also go too far the other way of, well, we don't know how to answer a question with this right now, and therefore we'll never keep that information. And then later on you say, oh, how about I answer this question? It's like, well, I could do that if I had multiple years of prior data, because we're talking about a trend over time. Oh, well, we don't have any of that data. So it's hard. Figuring out what information to keep and what types of things you want to track, very challenging. So let me check what else has happened in here. And always set max RAM, Andrew says. Use SP configure. I agree. Use SP configure.
The script you just showed me.
Yes. Yeah, but if you're just goofing around on your own machine and trying to do it in a one-time thing, Management Studio has a nice UI for the process. So,
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do I play? What is it called? Oh, it's a video game. I forgot. I was trying to make a salient joke, but
Still short question.
I just
yeah,
lost-
you should save that for the professionals.
It's like keep going, and I'll tell
Okay,
you.
don't worry. We'll rescue you, Mike. It's okay. All right, let's.
Far Cry 4. I don't know. I'm like something.
You know what? I'll give you an A for effort on that one. Okay, so this is what Anders linked. SP configure, very useful. There's a lot of powerful things that you can change using SP configure that does not require you to restart the SQL Server instance. That does not require you to dig into a GUI or otherwise fight with whatever. It's just a T-SQL statement that you can use to configure the machine, and it all works pretty well. You can totally mess up your configuration in a few keystrokes, so it's got that going for it as well. Just like how I can mess up the.
This is scary.
No, it's not that bad, but
It's. I mean, okay. Let me clarify. It's scary for someone like me who does a lot of analytical queries and pulling stuff. But like if you're coming from the DBA side, from you and Mala, fine. But if I'm going to guarantee if I hit SP configure, it's going to say I can't do it.
yeah, but it also documents what you did, so you can reverse it, like Anders mentions here. Yeah, because it's just a SQL script.
Okay, great.
All right. With that all in mind, let's talk about our next topic. This is something I don't remember if we talked about it on stream or not, but we're going to talk about it on stream again if we did. SQL Server 2025. So this was the announcement. Mala mentioned, hey, we didn't hear anything about this at Past Summit. We didn't hear about it until Ignite. And SQL Server 2022 AI edition. Yeah, but Anders, this time it's going to have your sync up to SQL Managed Instance, which that's a deep cut at SQL Server 2022, which promised we're going to have these connections to SQL Managed Instance both directions. It's like, oh, 2.5 years in, we finally got it done. Okay, just in time for the new edition. Okay, SQL Server 2025 is in preview, and I believe the summarization of this is AI and Fabric Edition. which if you look at this is the marketing material. So I'm going to drop a link to this in chat because that's what I normally do. There we go. Now everybody can stare along with me. But what do they talk about? AI built in. Best in class security and performance. But, basically, you can use Azure Active Directory Managed Identity, which now is Microsoft Entra Managed Identity. Okay. Optimized locking is something that is in Azure SQL Database that I think is useful. I think it's an interesting approach to locking. It's different from just read committed snapshot isolation. It's a little bit of a different story there. So that's a pretty decent feature. Fabric database mirroring. I mean, it's useful if you have Microsoft Fabric. Pay-as-you-go licensing. No thanks. I'd rather just pay once instead of continuously paying. Vectors.
Thinking the same thing I'm thinking.
Yeah. Vector search. Here's my problem. I have no idea how vector search performance, how well it performs in SQL Server or in Azure SQL Database for that matter. It's in preview in Azure SQL DB. I have not messed with it. Cosmos DB performance, time-wise is okay. Quality-wise, I've not had good luck with it. I don't think it does very well at retrieving relevant results. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry to interrupt. So between Ma and Kevin, so like I kind of come at it as like I make queries, I get data, I am a data dish digger. Is vector, in terms of mathematics, is vector a mathematical thing?
Yes. So, all right.
Vector is a vector data type. Yes.
Nope, that doesn't work. I was going to draw on the screen and have it work out, but you know what? Oh, I may use. I may not use. Forget it. I'm not even going to try to sketch out.
It's an array of numbers, right, Kevin?
What is it
that
called?
can represent data.
Yeah. It's okay. So let me talk it out just a little bit because yes, technically it's not an array; it's a vector. But I like making mathematicians angry as well, so I call it an array.
Typically is an array now.
All right. I'm gonna. Oh no! I can't. Wow. I'm gonna have to share entire screen again. All right. Let's share this screen. Very professional. Wait a minute. I can share Paint. There we go. Let's bring Paint back over here. Okay. Very professional. 100% professional stream. So what do we have here? What are we going to depict? I am going to try depicting the idea of a vector. So this better be Paint with Copilot. I don't know that I have Copilot in here. Anders, you can be my Copilot. So let's think about physics. Remember in physics class or any other sort of class, you had your coordinates. There is really a Paint with Copilot. You are correct, Anders. It is a thing that exists. So you have a vector. What is a vector? A vector is a direction and a magnitude. So we took some time in physics class and we drew out these arrows and, we had like there because we started at this point and we go down to this point. And so we have a direction, we have a magnitude, and we have all these different vectors. Well,
Gotcha.
Oh, it looks like lift and aviation. A little bit. But this is just two-dimensional. And you think about a three-dimensional vector, which I'm not even going to try to draw, but you have things pointing in different directions in 3 dimensions. And you have a 4-dimensional vector, and that's even harder to draw. And then you have n-dimensional vectors, where you've got to go back to Mala's cave in order to figure out how even to represent this visually. So instead, what we do is that we have a vector of numeric values that represent location in however many dimensions that we want to sort out this data. Now, this looks suspiciously like an array, but it is totally different from an array. So never tell a mathematician that this is an array, because no. Vectors are actually vertical.
It's a vector.
They're actually vertical. So arrays are
Oh,
horizontal.
are you a mathematician, Kevin?
I am not.
Just okay.
However, I am
Uh,
kind of trying to go somebody. I imagine someone in chat is actually a mathematician and is slowly getting angry at me for my depiction and how slipshod I'm being.
I thought you were thinking about airplane, like, what's your vector, Victor?
I mean, this probably was not a great day for me to stop huffing glue, but nonetheless.
Kevin, stop. You're too funny. You're too funny.
All right, so we have this vector. This basically is a representation of a bunch of numbers in dimensional space. Where this is relevant is there was a paper about a decade ago, and the paper said, hey, for natural language processing, it turns out that you can turn words or word relationships into numbers, and that if you convert the words into vectors, if you store them as vectors, you can retain a lot of the contextual information in the words, even if the computer obviously does not understand what those words mean. So Marshall just watched Airplane again last weekend. Don't Call Me Shirley. Absolutely. And the white zone is for loading and unloading only. So this paper also came out with a package, Word2Vec. And Word2Vec was an algorithm to translate words into vectors, into some dimensional space. And it turns out that vector addition, vector operations. So what I mean by vector addition is that if I have a vector for a word, this is actually the canonical representation that is in the paper, and everybody copies it because it works. It actually works out. If you use Word2Vec, you do get this result. But let's say that this is the vector for man. So that's the vector for man. This is the vector for king. Let's say that it looks like that. Then you have the vector for woman, and the vector for woman maybe looks like this. Then if you say, what is this vector? It turns out that vector is queen. And so what you get is that contextual relationship, even though we never tried to make it so that man, woman, king, and queen had this sort of relationship. It just turns out that based on the mathematical operations necessary, summarizing these vectors gave you back something that is really close. And so Word2Vec takes advantage of this pattern, this translation into vectors. So where all of this became useful is that, okay, well, I can take a vector of some number of dimensions, 384, 1536, pick whatever other magical number that you want, and I can hold some of the context of the language in those vectors. Then I can perform searches on those vectors. So I could have, for example, let's say that I want to look for vectors that are like this. And so vectors that look like this red one, unless you're monochromatic, in which case it looks like this gray one. So I'm looking for any vectors like this. I can perform some operation. There's a few different algorithms like cosine similarity, Manhattan distance, Euclidean distance. I'm just kind of data dumping at this point, but basically I want to figure out what are the vectors that are closest to this. And then the reason that I do want to find it is that those vectors that are close are probably semantically similar. So if I'm looking for a particular keyword, I'm looking for, let's say, I don't know, fire extinguisher. Actually, is a work related thing. So fire extinguisher. It turns out that some places people call them fire bottles, which I had vaguely heard of before, but the term fire bottle is not something that I would have grown up using, or pretty much anybody I knew grew up using. But I guess there's a particular region of the US that uses that term for fire extinguishers, the handheld fire extinguishers. So if I search for that term fire bottle and we have a lot of information about fire extinguishers and different varieties and what they do and blah blah blah, then I may search for the term fire bottle because that's the one I grew up with and get back documents that reference fire extinguishers because there's enough context to know that, oh, these are very similar terms. So, okay, that's the idea. If we store this data in vectors, vectors are vertical. So you've got that mnemonic going for you. So if we store that data in vectors, then we can search those vectors and we can come up with relevant results. And what I was saying about Cosmos DB was the storage process is reasonably fast. I don't think it's the fastest by any stretch, but it's reasonably fast. The lookup process doesn't seem like it's that great. I don't know. Again, that could just be my experiences with it. It could be that it's perfectly adequate. But I also don't know, well, what's SQL Server going to be like? Will it be fast to store this data? Maybe, maybe not. Will it be as fast as a dedicated vector database like a ChromaDB or something? I mean, technically it could be, but let's be honest, it's probably not going to be. So with enough RAM, of course, it'll be fast. Maybe, but, go back to like graph databases. SQL Server graph database, was that fast? No, it wasn't.
Are there others beside ChromaDB? Like you threw that out like really quick. Like are there other ones like that?
Oh, there are quite a few. There are quite a few dedicated vector databases. There are quite a few mixed databases. Postgres has a vector extension. Cosmos DB has a vector extension. MongoDB has a vector extension. I'm sure that there are others that have vector extensions. There are at least a dozen dedicated vector databases. And frankly, you can write your own vector database. It's not going to be very good, but you could write it.
If I wrote it, yeah, 100%. So, all right. So representing the noobs. My understanding of relational databases is like COD and what is it? It's like linear algebra, right? And,
yeah, relational algebra. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like you're talking about, so this is a different type of math. This is like not the same. This is different.
This is a bit different. Yes. It's not perfectly exactly the same. So yeah, you are correct. But okay. I don't think it's totally incompatible. It's just more of we're not necessarily talking about sets as much as we are talking about comparisons.
Gotcha.
So that's the quick, the riff on vector databases. And I've done a variation of that riff several times, which is how I was able to get away with something awfully technical for shop talk, like Anders mentions. Normally I try to blow that stuff off and be like, yeah, go look it up online. Let me find you a link, instead of just pulling it together myself, because I don't want to pull out a hat like that kind of thing very often. So let me go back and maybe I have to refresh this screen because I would like it to be at the top, but I'm not finding it at the top. Fine. Okay, so this is fighting me. I'm going to allow it to continue fighting me for the moment, but basically, what does SQL Server 2025 give us? Well, built-in AI. Okay. Retrieval augmented generation pattern. Okay. Easy to use vector support. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how easy to use it is. It might be. I have not tried it. Secure and performant. Again.
So the rest of it?
What's that, Mike?
So is the rest of it, because it needs to be, because that's what it does. Sorry.
Yeah.
Secure and performant, like that's why we use it. Like, sorry, I'm gonna be a jerk.
No, I mean, I look. This is marketing documentation. I don't believe it until I see it in practice. So, I am going to be very cynical about this because, I go back to look at how well Graph Database did, And I mean, I know some of the people who are tied in with Graph Database, and I like those people. It's just it didn't turn out very well.
Use vector support. Okay.
They started well. Well begun is half done. They started well, and then it got dumped.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh well, not enough people picked it up, so therefore it's done. Sort of like ledger databases in SQL Server. Sort of like a bunch of other bits of functionality that get partially finished. They are not far enough along that we can actually use them, but oh well, nobody's using them, so therefore we're not going to finish it. I mean, I understand you can't give me 100% product immediately. Fine. Give me a 90% product before throwing it out the door. Like, just don't give me the 40% and then get upset that nobody's using it because it doesn't actually cover our use cases. Like, oh, this is the minimum viable product. All right, cool. That's not viable though, because it's a minimum product, but it's not viable.
Not viable. So wisely put. Yes.
Let's not do a cyberpunk again.
So, I mean, we could probably think of if we put the people in chat here, Solomon, Marshall, Anders, as well as the rest of us, so we just start throwing out, I think we could come up with 10 to 15 separate major features in various versions of SQL Server that never reached viability, took developer effort, might have been good ideas. Some of them might not have been good ideas, but and just never actually accomplished what they were supposed to do. I mean,
and it just hangs out in the product because they can't get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because there is one customer who's like, yeah, this is perfect for me. The management data warehouse is exactly what I needed. Which, by the way,
God, yeah.
once you installed that, you could never delete it. So,
I think I saw one install even 3 or 4 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
I
when
used
I was
it once.
consulting, not 3 or 4 years. Oh gosh, it's been 7 years since I came here. 7 years ago, the job that I had before this one.
Yeah, I did in fact use management data warehouse. I installed it on a server once. In fairness, that was in 2010, 2011. So it was still a while before they effectively killed it. And I know Mala shared Brent Ozar's link. I'll share this link that's data engineers and some of the functionality that this person picked out. So again, starting off with enhanced AI capabilities. All right. This is where it's where they're going to try to market heavily. We did talk about optimized locking, extensions
so one second, Kevin. What exactly do they mean by that enhanced AI capability? Like it's going to write the code for you, or what is AI going to do there?
Well, okay. So right now, call external AI services using SP invoke external REST endpoint. So SP invoke external REST endpoint is basically let me make an API call from within SQL Server, which I'm not even angry about. I don't know that I want that on premises so much. In Azure, it makes some sense. On-prem, I can already see people thinking about COM objects and all the other fun stuff. But essentially it's like, oh, well, I can call Azure OpenAI or ChatGPT or something and make the API call and send in some data. Okay. Vector support. You're like, okay, you can do that, but just write an application to do that. I don't know that you need to do that within SQL Server itself. Vector support, so vector objects. We'll see what they're using. I mean, they do mention disk ANN, which is a good disk ANN is a good algorithm for storing vector data. So good on them. This is what Cosmos DB is now using as well. It's a good algorithm, but again, I'll believe the performance. I'll believe the quality of results when I have a chance to actually try it out in detail. Solomon asks, isn't invoke external REST endpoint just an HTTP web call? It is an HTTP web call. Yes, you are correct, Solomon. There is nothing AI special about it. They're just marketing it as a feature of, well, you can call ChatGPT's AI or API, but you know, you could call any other API as well. How do you even test this for performance? What you would do is you would take a lot of documents and figure out how quickly can I convert those documents? How quickly can I vectorize them? How quickly can I insert them? How quickly can I query them? How quickly can I perform similarity searches on them? Depending on the type of similarity search, how long does it take for me to get those results if I have a billion documents? Which is not absurd. It's not a crazy number of documents because
no, this happens to me a lot lately.
yeah, because
this is going to be this will be 2025. Like I have a queue like of questions for Mana and Kevin. Like I'm hitting the limit of my abilities. Like I have billions of records that I have to deal with some of my AI researchers, and I need to solve it. Like I need to figure it out.
that's why Mike is still in the office. He's got to figure them out
Yeah,
tonight.
exactly. My wife is asleep. Like she's like, "What are you doing?" Like, I'm trying to figure out how to compress billions of records.
First step is you delete 80% of them and see if anyone notices.
Louise. Tell that to like famous researchers.
So Andrew says, I would hate to do performance regression testing. Yeah, it's not fun. You can automate some of that stuff. You can automate a fair amount of it, but it's not fun. So yeah, that's what they're talking about with enhanced AI capabilities and management of models through REST interfaces. Okay, so you're still making these calls. There's nothing in here this is SQL Server in specific that you're building. You're going to train a GPT-4 model based on your data. Even retrieval augmented generation. I imagine that what they're talking about with RAG is, well, you can take your data and take the result set and send it into SP invoke external REST endpoint. Like, well, yeah, I can, but are you telling me that this is something special? I could do that with any database.
Right.
But some of this functionality, you know what? I think we may have talked about SQL Server 2025 because I remember Anders being angry about
this
regular
regex
expression
thing,
support.
Kevin. I know you were a big fan of that.
Yes.
I'm on Anders' side with that thing.
Yep.
I'm not. Yeah.
So, okay, we did talk about this. Too bad, chat. You're stuck with it again. Regular expression support, additional JSON support, native JSON data types, which...
Yes, I like that.
Native JSON data type. Well, it's interesting because when JSON came out, that support came out in SQL Server, they said, well, why would we need a native type? You just use a string. We learned the lesson from XML that we don't want or need native types. And then now they're like, oh, guess what? We're giving you this wonderful feature of native JSON data types along with indexing capabilities. You could have come out with that 12 years ago when you originally introduced JSON, but you were saying, no, native type was a mistake. You just want string.
Okay.
So
thank you for that makes it more clear to me.
Which I mean, I don't know. I don't have a major dog in this fight. I don't know if having a native type will actually be significantly better. I could see the benefits behind it. If you have a significant amount of structured JSON data that you're consistently shredding and querying. But at that point, I think you're probably storing the JSON data wrong, because if you're constantly shredding and querying it, then maybe you should just put it in a regular database structure and store it as regular data instead of storing it as JSON blobs. And
what do you mean by shredding?
Shredding is just the term for taking a JSON document and converting it into, converting it into a subsection, pulling out a section of the data based off of an attribute. So I only want to have the whatever internal JSON object. Let's say that I've got a person, and inside that person you might have a list of admissions and a list of discharges and a list of transfers.
It's like querying JSON data. Like shredding is like
Yes.
Like filtering it down.
Yeah, it's essentially extracting attributes from a document and converting it into a format that you can work with more easily.
Gotcha.
So just
Sorry.
fancy developer terminology.
Did you
But
say ANSI or fancy?
fancy with an F.
All right, not ANSI. Okay.
Correct. It is not
not the standards board.
correct. The standards board did not come up with the term shredding. They use that strictly for skateboarding.
Yo.
So basically, SQL Server 2025, we'll see. Normalizing a JSON blob is hard. It's so much easier to just store that blob and query into it. They're used to doing it in NoSQL solutions, so they want it to work in SQL Server as well. I mean, this is where I have a level of understanding, and my level of understanding is I will happily store your JSON if you tell me to give you back the entirety of the JSON as it is. If the JSON is an atomic item that you want to store in the database as JSON, and you want to use your application to perform any shredding or any element extraction, very well. Go forth and store it as JSON, store it however you want. However, if you are then asking me, well, within this JSON blob, I want you to start searching for these attributes. Now we have a problem, because now you are misusing the system. Now we need to talk about first normal form. So that's where I draw that line is, if you're asking me to make it atomic, I am happy making it atomic. I will accept it. I will return it. We're good. We have that interface. We have that agreement. Yeah, I don't mind storing it as a long string that's not being parsed. Yeah, exactly. And I also don't have a problem with that. It's been at least three Shop Talk episodes since Kevin has talked about normal forms. So we need to have the trailer park tornado sign. Like, it's been 0 episodes since Kevin has ranted about normal forms.
Hey, Kyle. Kevin hasn't talked about it. Hey, about normal forms the episode.
And let's wrap up with Solomon's point. Native types for XML made sense, as it is optimized and can greatly reduce the storage needed for a document, especially if node and attribute names are repeated. Not sure if there will be such a benefit to the native JSON type. There could be a benefit. If you're talking about a JSON list that it's a list of JSON objects, then yeah, you are going to have some repetition. So maybe the native type will help there. But I do agree. I think.
How different is this from the XML thing, Kevin? They went about an XML data type and all of that. So why do you need a second markup data type?
Because everybody started to hate XML and said JSON is way better.
Oh.
I mean, that's kind of what happened is, well, this markup language is too overwhelming and there's just too bloated. So let's go with this similarly bloated markup language, but isn't quite as bloated. It's like 80% of the bloat. And then they said, well, this one's way too bloated, so we need to go to YAML. That's only like 75% is bloated, but then has white space requirements. And then people came up with other stuff like, oh, YAML's so 2022. It's TOML today. We need TOML for everything. And then, there will be another markup language. Eventually we're going to get back to XML. People will be like, hey, I found this great new...
No, that's not happening.
I found this great new mechanism. It's called...
but like, you're wrong. It's not.
No, this wonderful new mechanism for sending text documents. It's called 835s and 837s. I just came up with the idea myself. That's a deep cut that Mike will get, but if you've worked in the healthcare industry, you might have just experienced some pain right there.
Yeah, that's like what is it? Jeff Foxworthy. Like, if you work in the health industry, you might get this joke.
Let me bring it up real quick, and see. Just stay away from the 990s. No, that one's not good. I'm looking for format guide. Reference guide, quick reference guide. Oh yeah. Okay, so if you need to have a document that's called "It's easier than you think," let me see.
Well said. Well said.
Because I hope. Oh, good. Everybody, this was 5 years of my life.
Oh yeah.
This is a format. This is a format for patient records, sending patient records back and forth between state and federal government agencies.
Yes.
This is a format that it totally makes sense. Trust me, bro.
Yeah. This is so I'm so grateful. Like there's other colleagues that help me with this. So like I'm on stage 2 of this. Thank God.
Actually, it
They've
does make
already
sense.
done
Okay,
all the hard work, and I'm like, thank you for doing the hard work. And then I'm like, make it available to researchers.
where this makes sense is if you have written COBOL programs. I mean, and there I'm being totally serious. That's not even a knock on COBOL.
Yeah. Because a lot, I know a lot of
Because you can see it's a mixture. It's a mixture of fixed width and delimited, with asterisks serving as partial delimiters. But then, even though there's an asterisk, this section has to be a certain number of characters long, and so on. So, yeah, basically, I had to deal with a lot of this pain. But it's easier than you think because there's a document that tells you that. And I think that's where we're going to wrap things up for Shop Talk. Shop Talk is easier than you think.
Years, it's tense.
So we will wrap things up. We have to get back on that time discipline. We're 7 minutes over. We use something similar to get data from MobileX on. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, 835s and 837s were a specific medical standard, but it was all based off of the same type of data transfer that you would have used at the time. We're talking like 60s and 70s when a lot of these were really formulated and standardized. So just because this was medical specific, yeah, I'm sure that a lot of other companies were using those things and probably dragging on into the 90s where people said, I've got an idea. We're going to replace this with this awful thing with XML, and XML will make life easier, and we'll move forward from there, and we'll be open a bridge to the 21st century.
You know what'll fix it? Cold Fusion. You know how many developers I met that were good at Cold Fusion? And I was like, okay.
I used Cold Fusion at a job.
At a hospital. Everybody has. I mean,
yeah.
Everybody of our age.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. So, all right.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. We're going to wrap things up for tonight. So thank you, everybody, for coming out here. Remember, tomorrow we have our first Advanced DBA session of the year. It will be online only, meetup.com/TriPass. Next Tuesday, we have our first in-person meeting of the year. So all of that you can find on the Meetup site. Check that out. And until we see each other, either maybe tomorrow, maybe in another episode of Shop Talk, or maybe you'll just find me cruising down the streets at some point and just yell something at me as I drive by. But until we do see each other, take care.